Hello everybody, Kyoto Winston here, and today I will be doing with Deku was Tristan part 21. So, in the last part, Deku, Dahlia, and the rest of Class 1A and also Class 1B went to the Beast Forest, them having to train their quirks, and also they have a surprise guest, the guest being Zeldris, him being there only to be Deku and Dahlia's special trainer. As after 2 days of training, whenever it was time for Class 1A and Class 1B to do their test of courage, Zeldris would have left the campsite for personal reasons. But after the test of courage started for like 30 minutes, that was when they would have been attacked by the League of Winds. Now, continuing the story, Deku, who is getting ready to face Muscular, he would have gotten into his fighting stance and also enchanting his arms with goddess powers, them starting to glow with light. As Muscular, who just turned around, he would have immediately rushed towards Deku, with Deku knowing that he can't dodge out of the way, since if he did, Muscular is going straight through Deku and towards Kota. So Deku has no other choice but to also run in towards Muscular and facing him head on, them having to clash with each other, as Muscular, who covered his entire body in muscle fibers, would have cocked back his arm and thrown it outwards towards Deku. Deku, seeing that, would have immediately used both of his hands to block the attack. And just as he did, Muscular would have used his other hand to smack Deku across the face. Deku being forced to take a step to his right, he would have used that step to spin around and try to kick Muscular across the face. But whenever he did, he would have actually missed Muscular, it being an inch away from Muscular's face, as Muscular would have grabbed Deku by his leg and, well, throw him off the cliff. Deku, while he is being thrown off of the cliff, he would have used his goddess powers to create a whip, him throwing that whip right towards Muscular, it wrapping around Muscular's neck as Deku would have pulled. Muscular being pulled towards the edge of the cliff, him having to take a step forwards and try to stop himself from also falling down the cliff, as he would have leaned back a bit, which Deku, using what Muscular just did, would have yanked himself back towards the edge of the cliff and onto the cliff. But while he's still in the air, he would have kneed Muscular in the face. And as Deku landed back onto the ground, he would have used his light enchanted arm to punch Muscular in the stomach, this sending Muscular flying to the wall of that cliff, with Deku manipulating those light particles that is around his body towards the palm of his hands. He would have yelled, "Arc!" as those light particles would have shoot out of Deku's palms and straight towards Muscular, them having to explode right in his face. Deku, who is still concerned about Kota, him after firing arc straight towards Muscular, he would have ran over to him. But just as he took a step towards Kota, Muscular would just come out unscratched, or well, unharmed, him saying, "Nice trick you got there, kid. My turn," as Muscular would have extended out his left arm, Deku being confused as multiple muscle fibers would have shot out of Muscular's arm, them being able to wrap around Deku and pull him towards Muscular. Deku, who is confused and surprised about this, he would of course been pulled straight towards Muscular. And just as he arrived at Muscular's arm, Muscular would have wrapped his other arm in muscle fibers, him starting to punch at Deku. As Kota, seeing all of this, would have a bit of flashback, him seeing his parents being killed by Muscular. Kota, after having that flashback, would have immediately used his quirk and fired a bit of water straight towards Muscular. Muscular, realizing that this kid is the one whose parents took out his eye, he would have stopped attacking Deku and walked over to him. Deku, who's still trapped in Muscular's muscle fiber, Deku, seeing that Muscular is about to attack Kota, he would have got even more concerned about Kota's safety, as he would start to spark with light. Muscular, being confused since he is right next to Deku, he would have said, What is this? As Deku would have exploded with light, him breaking free from Muscular's muscle fibers and sending Muscular back towards the wall of that cliff. As right after Deku did that, he would have fired a beam of light straight towards Muscular, him trying to make Muscular stay down for like one more second. It hitting Muscular and sending Muscular into the wall a bit more. Just then, Deku would have ran over to Kota and asked him if he is alright or not, which Kota just nods. As before Deku can pick up Kota and try to escape, that was when a portal would have appeared right in front of Muscular, with Deku being able to hear a sentence, it saying, well, something something dark, something something corruption, and something something begin. And right after that sentence was finished, the portal would have disappeared. Deku being confused, as Muscular would have dropped onto the ground, him starting to scream out in pain, with his body beginning to, well, morph. Deku, seeing that, would have immediately used his hands to cover Kota's eyes, him picking up Kota, as he would have told Kota that they are going back to the camp, and also telling Kota to not look back at what that man is doing. And by that man, I mean Muscular. With Deku, after telling Kota that, he would have basically jumped off the cliff and start to fly towards the base, or well, the main camp. Now, speaking of the base camp, Dahlia would have still been trying to defeat that monstrosity, with it being able to grab Dahlia by her, well, entire body. It would have thrown Dahlia through multiple trees, as Dahlia, who's in her heavy metal form, she would have just got back up and not being very hurt, as she would have just rushed back in. But whenever she arrived right in front of that monstrosity, it would have actually breathed fire with its mouth. This, of course, both surprising and shocking Dahlia, as she would have been hit by that attack point blank. And as Dahlia opens her eyes to see if she can do anything to change that situation, she would have saw that everything is in black and white. Her hearing a voice saying, you know, 'cause at this rate you are definitely going to lose. Dahlia turning around and saying, oh hey, Lance. Wait, did you came all the way over here just to help me? No. Great, I needed. Wait, what? I said no. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to do my job. What job? The job I was given by the king. To come here to see if you're okay or not. Which it looks like you're not. Yes, I'm not, Lance. So can you please help me? Still no. Why? Because this is your fight, not mine. And also, we fairies should not interfere with humans' businesses. Last but not least, humans are assholes. They do whatever they can to get what they want, no matter if it would cost their humanity or not. Stop wasting my time, Lance. I have people to save, so just skip the chit chat and just tell me for real. Are you going to help me or not? Fine, fine. I'll tell you how you can beat it. Wait, you know how to beat it? Sort of? How? Well, you see, a long time ago, Dad said that he also fought one of these, well, monstrosities, and that if you want to defeat them without killing them, you would need to basically take out a parasite. Okay, and where is that parasite? It is most of the time located in the middle of its chest and behind the human host. Delia, after hearing Lancelot basically telling her how to defeat that monstrosity, she would have started to think of ways to do that. But it would have actually been a lot harder than she thinks, as she realizes that if she just tried to pierce through the back of that monstrosity and try to take out that parasite, there is a chance that she can also pierce the human host, and even accidentally killing them. Lancelot, seeing that Delia is being troubled by this, he would have said, "Hey cuz, don't you remember about your sacred treasure that your parents and Lady Merlin especially made for you?" Uh, you mean my... Yes, I mean your spirit spear. No. You know, I always have a question about that. You mastered the spirit spear at a very young age, but after you mastered it, you never used it. Why is that? Oh, that. That's because I found out that the spirit spear is kind of a liability. It is strong, yes, but too strong. If I rely on the spirit too much, then when I am not able to use it, I will be basically useless and weak. That's why after I mastered it, I just stopped using it. Lancelot saying, "Well, since you already learned how to protect yourself with your bare fists, don't you think it is about time you use it again?" With Delia just smirking and saying, "Thanks, Lance. Then if nothing goes wrong, I'm gonna see you back at the forest." As that was when the world would have turned back to normal, with Delia realizing that whenever she was talking to her cousin, those two villains, i.e. Spinner and Magni, would have escaped, leaving that monstrosity behind to deal with the heroes. It being able to attack Tiger, but before it can kill Tiger, Delia would have went in and kneed that monster in the face. This sending the monster stumbling back as Delia would have tried to hold the monster in place, her doing so by covering the entire monster with, well, rocks. As Delia would have raised up her hand towards the sky, her saying, "To me, my sacred treasure, Spirit Spear Aspen." As within a second, Delia's spirit spear would have arrived, with Delia grabbing the spirit spear out of the air, as some weird energy would start to wrap itself around Dahlia, her being engulfed by it, and within a second the energy would have disappeared, Dahlia letting go of the spirit spear as it would start to float. Just then, the monster would have broke out of Dahlia's restraints, it having to immediately run straight towards Dahlia and trying to attack her while screaming at her. Dahlia, seeing that that monster is running straight towards her and is basically trying to kill her, she would have just put her hand in front of herself and pointing it straight towards that monster. As whenever she did do that, the Spear Aspen would have flew straight towards that monster, it having to pierce straight through the monster's right shoulder, this creating a gaping hole straight inside the monster as Dahlia would have closed her hand into a fist, with Aspen spinning itself around and around at high speeds. It would start to create a disc, which basically works like a chainsaw. Dahlia pulling her hand from right in front of her towards her other shoulder, Aspen would have flew straight back towards Dahlia and through that monster, it cutting the monster's head off. Actually, it is heads off, since it has two heads. But just as Dahlia cut through and off both of its heads, the monster would start to grow heads in its chest, which is right next to the human host. Dahlia, seeing that, she would have changed her hand from being a fist back into a palm. By the way, this is all happening with the same hand, and let's just say it is her right hand. Now, whenever she did that, she would have said, Spear Aspen, fifth form, multiply. As Aspen would start to spin around and turn into multiple and, dozens of daggers, her extending out her hand again, as all of those daggers would have flew straight towards that monster, them having to stab into the monster in multiple directions. But one of them would still be floating in the air, with Dahlia commanding that dagger to fly over the human body host and into the monster's chest. It doing so, and whenever it went through that monster, something would have came out along with it. Dahlia commanding that dagger to go back towards her, it would have done so, as Dahlia would have a closer look on what that dagger just got out of that monster, her having to see a squid-like creature, her being confused as whenever she looked back at the monster would have already disappeared, only leaving behind the human host. Her thinking, so this creature is the cause of that monster? Her pulling that creature from the dagger and throwing it straight up into the air, as whenever she did, she would have just snapped her fingers, as every single one of the daggers would have went up and towards that creature, them having to go straight through that creature and turning it into a billion pieces, also obviously killing it. After shredding and killing that creature, Dahlia would have ordered the Spirit Aspen to turn back into its first form, or its spear form, her having to step onto the spear and float along with it, And as she was hovering over the ground on Aspen, she would have told Mandalay that she's going to go into the forest and help her classmates. Her also telling Mandalay to not ask about the spear, since, now is not the time, as she would have just flew straight into the forest. As for Deku, whenever Dahlia just flew into the forest, that was when Deku would have arrived at the base while carrying Kota. Him landing and not seeing Dahlia anywhere, he would have asked Mandalay where Dahlia is. Her just telling Deku that he just missed her and that she just went inside the forest. Deku being worried for Dahlia, he would have also tried to run inside the forest and help out Dahlia. But that was when Mandalay would have stopped him. Her telling Deku that since he can heal others, he should heal the wild pussycats first, since 1. They know the forest better than anyone else. 2. If he healed Pixie Bob, rescuing the students from the villains is going to be a lot easier, because she can create those stone beasts. Deku grudgingly doing what she says. Him walking over to the members of the Wild Pussycats and starting to heal them. With his goddess powers, of course. Now, back over with Dahlia, she would have been flying all over the forest and trying to help out everyone she sees. This, of course, includes Shoji, who's unconscious on the ground, Ayama, who's lost and scared, and also Ochako and Asui. Her arriving just in time, as that was when Toga was about to escape after sucking out Ochako's blood. As Dahlia grabbing both Ayama and Shoji, she would have jumped off the Spear Aspen, it going straight towards Toga and basically pinning her into a tree. With Dahlia landing onto the ground safely, she would have asked both Ochako and Asui if they are alright or not, which they kind of are, I guess. Her being relieved, as she would have told them that they need to get Shoji and Ayama back to the base. Them being a bit confused, as they would have just told Dahlia that they can help Dahlia fight the villains, which Dahlia just says that she appreciates their help, but since Shoji is unconscious and Ayama is too scared to even move, if they go after the villains right now with all 5 of them, Ayama and Shoji are just going to be a liability, and this might cost them all of their lives. Asui and Ochako understanding, they would have just took Ayama and Shoji back towards the base. And while they are trying to do that, Dahlia would have turned back around to see that Toga is already gone. Her thinking, oh come on, I just looked away for 1 second and she's already gone. With the Spear Aspen removing itself from the tree, Dahlia would have stood back onto the spear and flew away, her trying to find Toga and follow her to the rest of the villains. As for Toga, she would have arrived at the rendezvous point, her seeing everyone there, and by everyone I mean all of the villains. But before they can call Kurogiri and open a portal to let them go through it, that was when Dahlia would have arrived also, her yelling, "You are not going anywhere!" Every villain turning around and seeing Dahlia on a spear floating. Them being a bit confused since they don't know where that spear came from. Also, it's floating. And just as every single villain are confused, Delia would have flew in and using the end of her spear, or well, the spear Aspen, she would have used it to smash Magni across the face, her sending him flying away. With Delia jumping off of Aspen, she would have landed on Spinner's face using her knee. Her turning around and seeing Toga trying to attack her, Delia would have did well, a backflip. Her having to flip over Toga and land right behind her. Delia trying to attack Toga. But that was when Dobby would have thrown a wave of cremation towards Delia. Delia being, of course, engulfed by it. However, before that cremation can make contact with Delia, Delia would have activated heavy metal and basically tank the attack. With Dobby saying, "Really? You want to stop us alone? You're stupid, aren't you?" As whenever Dobby said that, Delia would have just walked out of the cremation and in front of Dobby. Her grabbing Dobby by his hand and saying, "Who says I'm alone?" Her headbutting Dobby, as she would have continued saying, "Spear Aspen, second form, protector," as Aspen would have transformed into let's say a silvered armored giant. Yeah, just imagine Spear Chastival, the second form guardian, but armored and more metal-like. Now, Delia would have ordered Aspen to basically go and attack the villains and occupying them from attacking Delia. With Delia, after ordering Aspen to do that, she would have immediately turned to Toga and ran towards her. Her trying to take her out first, as Delia would have thrown a punch straight towards Toga, which Toga dodges. Her taking out her knife and trying to stab Delia, which since Delia is still in her heavy metal form, the knife would just basically break on impact. With Delia having to grab Toga by her wrist, she would have turned around and tried to throw Toga on the ground. Delia using her other arm, she would have thrown Toga onto the ground, just like how Deku thrown Bakugo onto the ground in the Heroes vs Villains test. Just then, Anomu would have came out of nowhere and attacked Delia. Delia being surprised, she would have been basically sent flying away. Her having to crash into a tree. But she would have just got back up within a second. Her rushing in and punching the Nomu in the head as hard as she can. Her having to burst the Nomu's head off, or well, literally punch the Nomu's head off. The Nomu would have fell onto the ground and turned into mud. Delia being confused since this has happened before, as that was when Mr. Compress would have tried to basically touch Delia and turn her into a marble. But Delia having to hear footsteps right behind her, she would have immediately turned around and dodged out the way. Her using her right hand as she would have pushed Mr. Compress into a tree. Him having to misuse his quirk and turn the tree into a marble, which would have surprised Delia. Delia being a bit more cautious as she would have sent a pillar of rock straight into Mr. Compress's stomach. This sending Mr. Compress flying up into the sky. And just as Mr. Compress is falling onto the ground, or up towards the ground, Dahlia would have sent another pillar of rock straight towards Mr. Compress, this having to hit Mr. Compress in the chest, him having to let go some of the marbles that was in his hand. Dahlia thinking that Mr. Compress just thrown some marbles at her, she would have immediately jumped out of the way and created a stone golem to break those marbles. But whenever that stone golem broke those marbles, Dahlia, realizing that those marbles contains her classmates, with those classmates being Tokuyami, Todoroki, and Bakugo. Dahlia, after realizing that, she would have immediately turned the ground into quicksand and basically saved everyone from the fall, with all three of them being inside the quicksand. Dahlia would have helped them get out of the quicksand and created more stone golems to protect them, since both Tokuyami and Todoroki are unconscious. As for Bakugo, he is half conscious. After saving her classmates, Dahlia would have turned around and rushed in, her trying to go for some answers. But that was when a portal would have appeared right in the middle of the battlefield, with another one of those quote-unquote failed experiments walking out of the portal. But this failed experiment is different, since it is covered in muscle fibers. Dahlia being a bit confused, since this monster is not like the ones she just fought. And yes, she did fought more of those monsters in the forest. And just as Dahlia is trying to figure out why this monster is different, that monster which was covered in muscle fibers would have immediately ran towards Dahlia and tried to attack her. Dahlia being caught off guard by its speed, she wouldn't be able to dodge out of the way in time. But luckily, Aspen would have went in and blocked the attack, it having to basically try and face off against that monster. And while Dahlia is fighting against all of the villains there, and Aspen is fighting against that monster, Bakugo would have fully got back his consciousness, him having to get back up and look around, him being a bit confused since around him are, well, 4 stone golems, Tokuyami and Todoroki still unconscious, 2 giants fighting against with each other, and then there's Dahlia, who's currently doing a 1v5. Bakugo, seeing that Dahlia is fighting off against 5 villains at once, he would have gotten a bit angry, with his thought process being that Dahlia is trying to show off her strength by fending off against 5 villains simultaneously. And if you didn't know, Bakugo lost against just one of them. So basically, Bakugo thinks that he is currently being made fun of by Dahlia, which is of course not the case, but that is what he is thinking right now. So Bakugo, wanting to prove his strength, he would have thrown an explosion which would have propelled himself straight towards, let's say, twice, with Bakugo having to stretch out his hand. He would have started to, well, spark his hand with explosion. But whenever he was doing that, that was when the twice that was in front of him would have turned into mud. This confusing Bakugo, as that explosion that was in his hand would have gone off. It having to unintentionally going straight towards Dahlia and blasting her back. Her being caught off guard, since, Dahlia didn't know that Bakugo is coming in and, well, attacking her. She would have been sent stumbling to her front by a few steps. But while she was stumbling to her front, that was when Mr. Compress would have came up and touched Dahlia by her head, her being turned into marble. As after turning Dahlia into a marble, all five of the villains there would have realized that if they don't basically call Kurogiri and tell him to bring them back to the villain's hideout, then Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and most importantly, All for One would think that they are either dead or arrested, meaning that they are just going to be left there for dead. Oh well, left there to be arrested. So now they would have to basically quote unquote back off for now, as the villains would have contacted Kurogiri and tell him to open a portal. Him doing so as another portal would have appeared right in the middle of the battlefield. Bakugo, seeing that the villains are either calling in reinforcements or are escaping, he would have tried to go in and basically stop them. But before Bakugo can do anything, that was when a wave of Hellblaze would have been fired from inside the forest, it having to go straight past Bakugo's head and heading for Mr. Compress. However, before this wave of Hellblaze can reach Mr. Compress, Dobby would have stepped in, him releasing his own wave of fire. Or well, cremation. It going straight towards the wave of Hellblaze and colliding with it. As while they're colliding, Dobby would have told Mr. Compress and the rest of the villains to go through the portal, them doing so while Dobby is holding off that wave of Hellblaze. And just as the villains are going through the portal, Deku would have ran out of the forest and stopped firing his wave of Hellblaze, him having to jump over Dobby's cremation. Deku would have tried to attack Dobby. However, Dobby using his other hand, he would have just fired another wave of cremation straight towards Deku. With Deku having to use Rebellion, he would have created a darkness sword, him swinging that sword and using full counter. Just then, the wave of cremation that Dobby sent straight towards Deku would have been reflected back towards himself. Dobby, seeing that the wave of cremation is going straight back towards him, he would have just used his other hand to fire a wave of cremation straight towards the ground, this having to push himself backwards and towards the portal, him going through it. As for the monster that Aspen is fighting against, it would have also been teleported away by Kurogiri. Now, after Deku used full counter and saw Dobby went through the portal, he would have just landed back onto the ground, him having to slowly turn around and release a massive amount of bloodlust straight towards Bakugo, revealing that his demon mark is already on his forehead. Deku, who in his point of view would have witnessed Bakugo throwing an explosion straight towards Dahlia and causing her to be captured by the villains, he would have started walking straight towards Bakugo and saying, "Katsuki, give me one good reason why I shouldn't kill you right now." And that will be the end of this video. But before I do end this video, I would like to thank all of you guys for watching my videos and helping me reach 2,000 subscribers. As for the 2,000 subscriber special, I will leave a poll on my community tab. So please go over there and vote for what I should do for the special. Also, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. That'll be amazing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And again, thank you guys so much for helping me reach 2,000 subscribers. Bye!